Diddy, Biggie, The Confessional, Part 3. Biggie and Tupac. Biggie and Tupac.
Tupac Shakur is a music legend, and for a long time, this community and worldwide have been wanting justice for Tupac. Today, we are taking that first step.
The courtroom was electric with tension as Sean Diddy Combs, the once untouchable architect of Bad Boy Entertainment, sat at the defense table flanked by his legal team. His tailored suit and calm demeanor seemed to mock the gravity of the situation, but the cracks in his empire were beginning to show. This wasn't just another celebrity trial. This was the trial that could unearth decades of secrets buried deep within the glitzy, cutthroat world of hip-hop, a trial that could bring the entire house of cards crashing down. And at the center of it all was Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, a name that, until recently, had only existed on the periphery of the rap game's darkest whispers, now thrust into the harsh light of public scrutiny.
The only man currently facing charges in the case, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, claims that Sean Combs, also known as Diddy, paid for a hit on Tupac.
Keefe D was no ordinary witness. He wasn't some opportunist looking for his 15 minutes of fame. He was a relic of the streets, a man who had lived through the chaos of the 1990s hip-hop wars and had walked the line between myth and menace. His name had been whispered in backrooms, nodded to in cryptic interviews, and hinted at in conspiracy theories for years. But now, he was more than a shadowy figure from the past. He was the prosecution's key to unraveling one of the most infamous nights in music history. Keefe D's testimony wasn't just a story. It was a reckoning, one that threatened to dismantle the legacy of one of hip-hop's biggest icons.
Named Diddy 77 times in court documents related to Tupac's.
The trial's primary focus was the night of September 7, 1996. The night Shakur was gunned down in a drive-by shooting on the Las Vegas Strip. For decades, the assassination had remained unsolved. A chilling reminder of the violence that had consumed the East Coast-West Coast feud. But the prosecution argued that this was no random act of street violence. They claimed it was a calculated hit, orchestrated at the highest levels of the music industry. Keefe D's account painted a picture of betrayal, desperation, and cold, hard cash. A world where loyalty was a commodity and power was everything.
The centerpiece of a lot of what happened during direct testimony were freak-offs. And what the prosecution tried to show was that he forced and or coerced her into doing these freak-offs. And we've talked about this earlier this week, that at least my opinion is that in a lot of these, the prosecution just didn't close the loop. It was something she felt.
According to Keefe D, the origins of that fateful night could be traced back to a chain of events that began months earlier. The East Coast-West Coast feud wasn't just a media invention. It was a simmering conflict fueled by egos, diss tracks, and a desire for dominance. At its heart were two titans, Shakur, the raw, unapologetic voice of Death Row Records, and Sean Diddy Combs, the polished mogul behind Bad Boy Entertainment. The feud exploded into the public consciousness with Shakur's blistering diss track, a track that didn't just take aim at Diddy and his associates, but eviscerated them in a way that couldn't be ignored. Keefe D claimed that this track, along with a series of escalating provocations, pushed Diddy to take drastic action. The courtroom listened intently as Keefe D recounted his alleged meeting with Diddy, a meeting that would set the stage for what was to come. The details were chilling. Keefe D alleged that Diddy had approached him with an offer, a bounty on Shakur's head. While the exact figure was debated, the implication was clear. Diddy wanted Shakur out of the picture permanently. Keefe D claimed that this wasn't just about a personal vendetta. It was about survival. Shakur's growing influence, his relentless attacks on Bad Boy, and his alliance with Suge Knight made him a threat that couldn't be ignored. Diddy, according to Keefe D, saw no other option.
It was like two children in grade school that just hit it off and just hung out with each other all the time.
This wasn't just a story of two rivals clashing in the spotlight. It was a story of calculated moves made in the shadows. The prosecution argued that Diddy's alleged actions were part of a broader pattern, a pattern of using money and influence to manipulate control and, when necessary, eliminate threats. They pointed to evidence from years of investigations, including Keefe D's own past confessions to law enforcement, as well as testimonies from others who had once been part of D's inner circle. But it wasn't just about what Keefe D said. It was about what he represented. He was a living link to a world most people only glimpsed through headlines and rumors. The defense, of course, fought back with everything they had. Diddy's lawyers painted Keefe D as a man with a long history of bending the truth to suit his needs. They pointed to his criminal record, his immunity deals, and his penchant for self-promotion. They argued that his account was riddled with inconsistencies and that he was using the trial as a platform to settle old scores and rewrite his own narrative. But the prosecution countered with chilling details that were hard to ignore. Details about the night of the shooting, about the car that pulled up alongside Shakur's, and about the motivations that drove the men inside.
Now for what's trending in true crime, nearly 30 years after the death of legendary rapper 2Pac Shakur, the man accused of his murder is now claiming that Sean Diddy Combs once ordered a hit on the rap icon. In a recent court filing, a 2009 interview between police and Dwayne Keefe D. Davis is making headlines yet again.
Keefe D's testimony wasn't just about what happened on that night in Las Vegas. It was about the culture of the time, a culture where the lines between business and personal were blurred, where loyalty could be bought, and where the pursuit of power often came at a devastating cost. The courtroom heard about the infamous casino brawl that preceded the shooting, a brawl that allegedly involved Shakur and members of the Southside Crips, including Keefe D's nephew, Orlando Baby Lane Anderson.
It may be some truth to it. But this dude is raping grown men. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we can laugh at it, but, you know, it sounds like it's true. I'm looking at it right now, and Diddy, he did go to prison, and he offered the inmate $2.3 million to settle the case, so.
They heard about the car ride that followed, the moment when Keefe D and his crew spotted Shakur's BMW, and the split-second decision that changed everything. But the trial wasn't just about that one night. It was about the years of whispers and rumors that had surrounded Diddy and his empire. The prosecution delved into allegations of payoffs, cover-ups, and intimidation, allegations that painted a damning picture of a man willing to do whatever it took to protect his empire. They pointed to past lawsuits and settlements, to accusations from former associates, and to the mountain of circumstantial evidence that seemed to suggest a pattern of behavior. This wasn't just about Shakur. It was about a legacy built on secrets and the people who had been silenced along the way. Outside the courtroom, the reaction was a mix of shock and grim acknowledgement. For some, Keefe D's testimony was the missing piece of the puzzle, the confirmation of what they had always suspected. For others, it was a bridge too far, a story too outrageous to be true. But whether you believed Keefe D or not, one thing was clear. The trial was tearing down the carefully constructed facade of one of hip-hop's most iconic figures. It wasn't just about what Diddy may or may not have done. It was about the world he represented, a world where power and influence often came at an unspeakable cost.
Right now, Davis is fighting for bail ahead of his murder trial, which he has pleaded not guilty for.
As the trial continued, the stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just about justice for Shakur. It was about the future of an industry, a culture, and a legacy. The courtroom drama was far from over, and the questions it raised were only beginning to take shape. What other secrets were waiting to be uncovered? And how far would those in power go to keep them hidden? The answers, it seemed, were still out there, waiting to be unearthed.
So why do you think they tied Diddy name to it?
Because it makes the East Coast and West Coast war works for the authorities and for the news media. Didn't no cops do that. It was an East Coast, West Coast war, and it was a drive-by shooting. It was never no damn drive-by shooting.
And yet, the turmoil surrounding Sean Diddy Combs wasn't just confined to the courtroom. The trial was a flashpoint, but the cracks in his carefully crafted persona had been forming for years, stretching far beyond the events of 1996. This wasn't just about one night on the Las Vegas Strip. It was about the empire Diddy had built and the bodies, literal and figurative, that had been left in its wake. The East Coast-West Coast feud may have been the backdrop, but the story that was now unraveling exposed a much bigger truth. Power in the hip-hop world came at a price, and Diddy, it seemed, had been willing to pay it in full. The prosecution didn't stop at Keefe D's testimony. They dug deeper, pulling threads that led not just to Shakur's fateful encounter, but to a pattern of behavior that painted Diddy as a man who thrived on control, manipulation, and fear. Central to their case was the claim that the East Coast-West Coast feud itself had been fueled, if not outright manufactured, by men like Diddy and Suge Knight. For years, fans and insiders had speculated that the rivalry was more than just artistic competition, that it was a carefully orchestrated battle for dominance in a rapidly growing industry. And now, with Diddy on trial, those suspicions were starting to look a lot more like reality.
They got to come up with some kind of evidence, and they got to have Keefe D say and point to some kind of evidence, which I don't think he could, that Diddy put out the hit on Tupac. Yeah, they gonna press him.
The animosity between Death Row and Bad Boy wasn't just a war of words. It was a game of chess with real-world consequences. Diss tracks became declarations of war, music videos were turned into coded threats, and every move was designed to humiliate and destabilize the other side. But while the public saw it as entertainment, insiders knew it went much deeper. The trial revealed that Diddy's alleged involvement in Shakur's demise wasn't just a personal vendetta. It was a strategic move to solidify his position at the top of the industry. And if that meant taking out a rival who had become too dangerous, so be it.
The feds, Al Capone style, have not charged everything under the sun. They've charged 3 main charges: racketeering, sex trafficking, and the transport of a... And I'll tell you, I don't know about the racketeering charge. It's pretty sweeping. And I'll tell you what the general elements are.
The trial took an even darker turn when court filings revealed that Diddy's power play wasn't limited to just rival artists. Witnesses described an intricate network of enforcers who operated behind the scenes, ensuring loyalty and silencing dissent. One former associate claimed that Diddy's inner circle was more than just close friends. They were a well-oiled machine tasked with carrying out his orders no matter how extreme. This included alleged instances of intimidation tactics that went far beyond subtle warnings. The prosecution suggested that rival executives and even journalists had been targeted over the years, with some allegedly receiving anonymous threats after publishing unflattering stories or working with death row artists. Adding fuel to the fire was the revelation of surveillance footage from industry events that the prosecution claimed showed Diddy's team closely monitoring key players from death row. One clip, shown in court, allegedly captured members of Diddy's entourage tailing Suge Knight and Shakur at a Los Angeles nightclub just weeks before the Vegas incident. While the defense dismissed this as coincidental, the prosecution argued that it was part of a larger strategy to gather intel and stay one step ahead of the competition. These claims, while difficult to verify, painted a picture of a man who was not just reacting to the feud, but actively engineering its most volatile moments.
When the whole East-West thing started, we were caught off guard, and that broke my man's heart.
Perhaps most chilling was the testimony from a former Bad Boy employee who described working at one of Diddy's lavish parties, only to overhear a conversation that hinted at handling problems with rivals. The employee claimed that while the language was veiled, the intent was unmistakable. Diddy viewed the feud as a high-stakes game where there could only be one winner. This testimony added another layer of complexity to the prosecution's argument that the events of 1996 weren't just the result of a feud spiraling out of control, but the culmination of a carefully laid plan. Whether or not the jury believed these accounts, one thing was certain: the trial was revealing the lengths to which power players in the industry would go to protect their empires. The prosecution presented evidence that painted a damning picture of Diddy's rise to power. It wasn't just about the hits or the flashy parties, it was about control. Former associates came forward, some under the cover of anonymity, to describe a man who would stop at nothing to protect his empire. There were whispers of payoffs, threats, and even surveillance of potential rivals. One witness described an incident where they were allegedly approached by someone in Diddy's camp with a not-so-subtle warning, a reminder to stay in line if they wanted to keep working in the industry. These stories, while unproven, added weight to the prosecution's argument that Diddy's influence stretched far beyond the studio.
The question is he a criminal? Is he basically akin to a mob boss running several criminal enterprises? And while it's very clear to me he is a depraved, disgusting person, we have to prove that he violated the law.
It wasn't just a question of rivalry. It was a question of survival. The trial delved into the financial stakes of the feud, revealing just how much was on the line for both sides. Death Row Records and Bad Boy Entertainment weren't just record labels. They were empires, each with millions of dollars at stake. A single misstep could mean the difference between dominance and irrelevance. And in the cutthroat world of 1990s hip-hop, dominance wasn't just about chart positions. It was about respect. Losing that respect wasn't just humiliating. It was dangerous. For Diddy, the stakes couldn't have been higher. And according to the prosecution, that's exactly why he made the decisions he did. But the courtroom was only one battlefield. Outside, the trial reignited conversations about the darker side of the music industry. Fans, journalists, and insiders alike were forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that the world they idolized was often built on exploitation and fear. The East Coast-West Coast feud may have been the most visible example, but it was far from the only one. The trial exposed a culture where power was wielded like a weapon, and the ones who suffered most were often the ones who had the least to lose. The trial also revealed the personal cost of Diddy's alleged actions. While the focus was on Shakur, the ripples of that night in 1996 extended far beyond him. The families of those involved were left to pick up the pieces, grappling with loss and trauma that no amount of money or fame could erase.
Now, Combs has long denied any involvement with Tupac. He's never been charged. Our question this morning, how believable is Keefe D's Diddy accusation?
For Shakur's mother, Afeni Shakur, the trial was a painful reminder of the son she had lost. For Biggie's family, it was a chilling glimpse into the world that had claimed their loved one. And for the countless others who had been caught in the crossfire of the feud, it was a stark reminder that the price of fame was often far too high.
They saw evidence in the case. They immediately honed in on racketeering and they started saying, why is this racketeering with one guy? And they're charging this one guy. They had a real problem with that. They did not have a problem with the Mann Act. They found him guilty on the Mann Act. And they hung 6 to 6 on racketeering.
And then there were the fans. For years, they had idolized Diddy, seeing him as the ultimate hustler, the man who had turned nothing into something. But now, many were starting to question the cost of that success. Was the man they had admired really just another manipulator, willing to do whatever it took to stay on top? Or was he, as his defense argued, a victim of circumstance, caught in a web of lies and betrayal that had spiraled out of control? The truth, as always, was likely somewhere in between. But one thing was clear. The trial was rewriting the narrative of an entire era. As the trial continued, the stakes only grew higher. The prosecution hinted at more revelations to come, teasing evidence that could potentially tie Diddy to other incidents that had long been the subject of speculation. The defense, meanwhile, doubled down on their efforts to discredit Keefe D, painting him as a liar with nothing to lose and everything to gain. But no matter how the trial ended, one thing was certain. The world of hip-hop would never be the same.
You heard about Diddy law firm breaking ties with him and Miami Beach taking his day away?
Well, all the things that happened to Diddy and he losing friends, companies, cities, city names, city girls.
And so, as the courtroom drama unfolded, the world watched with bated breath. This wasn't just a trial. It was a moment of reckoning for an entire industry. The question wasn't just whether Diddy was guilty or innocent. It was whether the truth would finally come to light. And if it did, what would that mean for the legacy of one of hip-hop's most iconic figures? But what do you think? Is this the beginning of the end for Diddy, or just another chapter in his larger-than-life story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, stay tuned, because this story is far from over.